The Garden of Beginning. In the very beginning, before time had a name and before the stars knew their places in the heavens, there was God. And God, in his infinite creativity and boundless love, decided to create. Not because he was lonely, but because love itself desires to give, to share, to bring forth beauty. He spoke into the darkness, and his voice was like thunder and whisper combined. "Let there be light," he said, and light burst forth, brilliant and warm. He separated the light from the darkness, calling one day and the other night. And he saw that it was good. Day followed day as he continued his masterpiece. He gathered the waters and let dry land appear. He filled the seas with creatures that swam and dove and played. He decorated the earth with every kind of plant, trees that would bear fruit season after season, flowers that would bloom in countless colors, grass that would carpet the ground in green softness. The sky he filled with birds of every kind, some with songs so sweet that they would make hearts soar, others with wings so vast they could ride the wind for hours. In the waters, great whales and tiny fish, each with their purpose, each with their beauty. On the land, he placed animals, some that would run swift and sure, others that would move slow and steady. Creatures great and small, each reflecting a different aspect of his creativity. And still, something was missing. So God knelt down, and with his own hands, he shaped dust from the earth. Carefully, lovingly, like an artist with clay, he formed a human being. And when the form was complete, God breathed his own breath into this creation. The man came alive, and God called him Adam. God planted a garden in a place called Eden. It was paradise, a place where everything grew in abundance, where peace reigned, where there was no fear, no pain, no death. Trees of every kind grew there, including two special trees at the garden's center, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God walked with Adam in the cool of the day. They talked together, and God showed Adam all he had made. He brought each animal to Adam to name, and whatever Adam called them, that became their name. But among all the creatures, there was no companion suitable for Adam. So God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. While he slept, God took one of his ribs and fashioned from it a woman. When Adam awoke and saw her, his heart recognized its counterpart. "This is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh," he declared with joy. Her name was Eve, and together they would tend the garden. God gave them only one rule. You may eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. It was not a harsh restriction, but a loving boundary, a way to trust, to choose love freely. For a time, all was perfect peace. Adam and Eve walked with God, tended the garden, enjoyed its fruits, and lived in harmony with all creation. They had meaningful work, perfect relationship, and the very presence of God himself. It was the way things. The call of Abraham. Many years later, when the world had grown troubled and people had wandered far from God's presence, there lived a man named Abram in the city of Ur. He was settled in his life, living among his family and people, following the customs he had always known. But one day, God spoke to him. The voice was unmistakable, carrying both authority and tenderness. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." This was no small request. God was asking Abram to leave everything familiar, his home, his extended family, the places he knew,
the security of the known world. And he was asking him to go somewhere. The destination itself was not yet revealed. It would require trust of the deepest kind. But God made a promise that day, a promise that would echo through generations. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Abram, who was 75 years old, chose to believe. He gathered his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions, and they set out. They didn't have a map or GPS. They had only God's word and his presence, and somehow that was enough. They journeyed through Canaan, and wherever they went, Abram built altars to the Lord. These altars were markers of faith, declarations that God was real, that he was present, that he could be trusted. Even when famine came and they had to go to Egypt for a time, even when there were conflicts with Lot and they had to separate, Abram kept trusting. Years passed. Abram and Sarai grew older. The promise of descendants seemed increasingly impossible. They had no children, and Sarai was long past the age of childbearing. But God appeared to Abram again in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. Abram's heart responded honestly, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless? God took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be. The night sky stretched above them, infinite and glittering. Thousands upon thousands of stars blazing in the darkness. And somehow, despite the impossibility, despite his age and circumstances, Abram believed. And that faith, the Bible tells us, was credited to him as righteousness. God made a covenant with Abram that night, a binding promise sealed in an ancient ceremony. He changed Abram's name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations, and Sarah's name to Sarah, meaning princess. The new names were prophetic, declarations of what was yet to come. Still, years passed, but finally in their old age, the miracle happened. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son. They named him Isaac, which means laughter, because Sarah had laughed when she first heard the promise, and now she laughed with pure joy. God has brought me laughter, she said, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Abram's faith had been tested, stretched, and refined, but God had proven faithful. The impossible promise had come to pass, and through this one man's willingness to trust, to step out in faith, to believe God's word even when circumstances screamed otherwise, God's plan to bless all nations would eventually unfold.
Joseph's journey from pit to palace. In the generations that followed, there came a young man named Joseph. He was the 11th son of Jacob, but he held a special place in his father's heart. Jacob had loved Joseph's mother, Rachel, deeply, and Joseph reminded him of her. Jacob gave Joseph a richly ornamented robe, a coat of many colors that set him apart from his brothers. It was beautiful, but it was also a symbol that stirred jealousy in the hearts of his older brothers. They already resented the favor their father showed Joseph, and their resentment grew into hatred. Joseph had dreams, vivid, prophetic dreams that he in his youth shared openly with his family. In one dream, they were binding sheaves of grain in the field when suddenly his sheaf rose and stood upright, while his brother's sheaves gathered around and bowed down to it. In another dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to him. His brothers' hatred intensified. "Do you intend to reign over us?" they sneered. "Will you actually rule us?" Even his father rebuked him. though he kept the matter in mind. One day, when Joseph went to check on his brothers who were tending flocks far from home, they saw him coming in the distance. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to one another. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." But Reuben, the oldest, convinced them not to kill Joseph. Instead, they stripped him of his robe and threw him into an empty cistern. While they sat down to eat, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants passed by, and Judah suggested they sell Joseph as a slave rather than leave him to die. So they pulled Joseph up from the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. The merchants took him to Egypt, far from his home, far from everything he knew. His brothers took his beautiful robe, killed a goat, and dipped the robe in blood. They brought it to their father, who concluded that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. Jacob was inconsolable in his grief. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. But even in slavery, God was with Joseph. The Lord gave him success in everything he did, and Potiphar noticed. He put Joseph in charge of his entire household. But then Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of assault, and he was thrown into prison, though he was innocent. Once again, everything was taken from him. But once again, God was with him. Even in prison, God gave Joseph favor, and the warden put him in charge of all the prisoners. In that prison, Joseph interpreted dreams for Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. His interpretations came true exactly as he said they would. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was released, but the man forgot. For 2 more years, Joseph remained in prison. Then, Pharaoh had troubling dreams that none of his wise men could interpret. Finally, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Pharaoh summoned him, and Joseph interpreted the dreams. 7 years of abundance would be followed by 7 years of famine. He advised Pharaoh to store up grain during the abundant years to prepare for the famine he knew was coming. Pharaoh was so impressed that he put Joseph in charge of the entire operation. At 30 years old, Joseph went from prisoner to second in command of all Egypt. He oversaw the storage of grain during the years of plenty, preparing for the famine he knew was coming. When the famine struck, it affected not only Egypt, but also Canaan, where Joseph's family lived. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy grain. They came and bowed before Joseph, not recognizing the brother they had sold into slavery decades before. But Joseph recognized them. After testing them to see if they had changed, Joseph finally revealed himself. "I am Joseph," he said. "Is my father still living?" His brothers were terrified, but Joseph comforted them. "Do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Joseph could see what they couldn't see in that moment of betrayal years ago. God had been working through it all: the pit, the slavery, the false accusation, the prison, the forgotten years. All of it had positioned Joseph to save not only Egypt, but also his own family during the famine. He brought his entire family to Egypt, where they settled and prospered. Jacob, in his old age, was reunited with the son he thought he'd lost forever. And Joseph, the dreamer who had been betrayed and sold, now understood that his dreams had been prophetic in a way he never imagined. "You intended to harm me," he told his brothers, "but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." It's a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, when everything seems lost, God is still working. What others mean for evil, He can transform for good. The story isn't over when we're in the pit. God is writing a redemption story that we can't see yet.
Moses and the burning bush. Centuries passed, and the descendants of Jacob, now called Israelites, had multiplied greatly in Egypt. But a new Pharaoh arose who didn't remember Joseph, and he feared the growing number of Israelites.
He enslaved them, forcing them into hard labor, making their lives bitter with difficult service. In this dark time, a baby boy was born. His mother, desperate to save him from Pharaoh's decree that all Hebrew baby boys should be killed, placed him in a waterproofed basket and set it along the reeds along the Nile River. Pharaoh's daughter found the baby and adopted him, naming him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace with every advantage, but he knew he was Hebrew. One day, as a young man, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. In anger, Moses killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. When Pharaoh learned of this, Moses had to flee for his life. He ended up in Midian, in the desert, far from the palace where he'd been raised. He married, had children, and settled into the quiet life of a shepherd, tending his father-in-law's flocks. 40 years passed. The prince of Egypt became a desert nomad. His dreams of delivering his people seemed like distant, foolish memories. But one ordinary day, while tending sheep near Mount Horeb, Moses saw something extraordinary. A bush was on fire, but it wasn't being consumed by the flames. Curious, he went closer to investigate. Then God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses!" "Here I am," Moses replied. "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Moses hid his face, afraid to look at God. Then God said something that would change everything. "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Moses' heart must have leapt. This was what he'd once wanted to do before everything went wrong, before he became a fugitive. But then God said, "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." Moses' excitement turned to fear. "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God answered, "I will be with you." But Moses continued to object. "What if they don't believe me? What if they won't listen? I'm not eloquent, I'm slow of speech." To each objection, God patiently responded. He gave Moses signs to perform. He promised that Moses' brother Aaron would speak for him. Finally, God said with firm love, "Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." So Moses went. This 80-year-old shepherd, who felt inadequate and afraid, who had failed 40 years earlier, was being called back to Egypt. Not in his own strength this time, but with God's presence and power. The confrontation with Pharaoh was long and difficult. God sent plague after plague, each one demonstrating his power over the gods of Egypt. Finally, after the 10th plague, Pharaoh let the people go. Moses led them out of Egypt, not with an army, but with a staff and the presence of God. When they reached the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army pursuing them, the people panicked. But Moses said, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind. The waters divided, and the Israelites walked through on dry ground, with walls of water on both sides. When the Egyptian army followed, the waters came crashing back, and the people were saved. Moses, who once tried to deliver his people in his own strength and failed, had now seen God do what was impossible. The burning bush had marked the turning point, the moment when Moses learned that God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
David, the shepherd king. Generations later, when Israel had become a nation with its own kings, God sent the prophet Samuel to a man named Jesse in Bethlehem. God had rejected King Saul, and he was choosing a new king from among Jesse's sons. Jesse paraded his sons before Samuel, tall, strong, impressive young men. When Samuel saw the eldest, Eliab, he thought surely this was the Lord's anointed. But God said, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. One by one, 7 of Jesse's sons passed before Samuel, and the Lord had not chosen any of them. Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered, "but he is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So they sent for David, the youngest son, the one they'd left in the fields because he didn't seem important enough to include. When he arrived, ruddy and bright-eyed, the Lord said to Samuel, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. But David didn't immediately become king. He went back to tending sheep, waiting for God's timing. When war broke out with the Philistines, David's older brothers went to fight. David stayed home with the sheep. But one day, Jesse sent David to take food to his brothers at the battlefront. When David arrived, he heard something that made his blood boil. A giant named Goliath, over 9 feet tall, covered in armor, wielding weapons of bronze and iron, was taunting the army of Israel. Twice a day for 40 days, he had been challenging them to send someone to fight him. The entire Israelite army, including King Saul, was terrified. But David, this shepherd boy, said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" When Saul heard about David's words, he sent for him. David said, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul tried to dissuade him. David was only a boy, and Goliath had been a warrior from his youth. But David told him about the times he'd protected his sheep from lions and bears. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul tried to give David his own armor, but it didn't fit. So he took it off and went to face Goliath with just his shepherd's staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones from the stream. When Goliath saw him, he was insulted. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods. But David called back, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As Goliath moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. He reached into his bag, took out a stone, and slung it. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead and sank into it, and the giant fell face down on the ground. David had defeated Goliath without a sword, with only faith and a stone. He had seen what others couldn't see, that the battle belonged to the Lord, and that size,
Elijah and the still small voice. Years after David's reign, during a time of great spiritual darkness in Israel, there was a prophet named Elijah. The king and queen, Ahab and Jezebel, had led the nation into idol worship. Altars to Baal covered the land, and the prophets of the Lord were being killed. God called Elijah to confront this evil. He told King Ahab there would be no rain for years except at Elijah's word. Then God sent Elijah into hiding by a brook, where ravens brought him bread and meat each morning and evening, and he drank from the brook. When the brook dried up, God sent him to a widow in Zarephath. She was down to her last bit of flour and oil, preparing to make a final meal for herself and her son before they died of starvation. But Elijah asked her to make him bread first, with this promise: "The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." She trusted and obeyed, and the miracle happened exactly as promised. For many days there was food for her, her son, and Elijah. After 3 years of drought, God told Elijah to present himself to Ahab, and he would send rain. Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a contest on Mount Carmel. 2 altars would be built, and the God who answered with fire would be the true God. The prophets of Baal went first. They danced, shouted, and cut themselves from morning until evening, but no fire came. When it was Elijah's turn, he dug a trench around the altar, arranged the wood, and placed the sacrifice on top. Then he had them drench everything with water 3 times until the trench was filled. Elijah prayed simply, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Fire fell from heaven, consuming not only the sacrifice, but also the wood, the stones, the soil, and the water in the trench. The people fell on their faces and cried, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" It was a magnificent victory. But immediately afterward, when Queen Jezebel threatened Elijah's life, he ran away in fear. He traveled into the wilderness, sat under a broom tree, and prayed to die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said, "take my life." An angel touched him and provided food and water. Strengthened, Elijah traveled 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, where he spent the night in a cave. God asked him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah poured out his discouragement. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." God told him to go stand on the mountain, for he was about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper, a still, small voice. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went to stand at the mouth of the cave. God spoke to him there, giving him new instructions, new tasks, new perspective. He wasn't alone. There were 7,000 in Israel who had not bowed to Baal. God's work wasn't finished, and neither was Elijah's. This moment teaches us something profound. After the spectacular miracle on Mount Carmel, Elijah learned that God doesn't always speak in the dramatic moments. Sometimes, maybe most times, He speaks in the quiet, in the still small voice that comes when we're discouraged, when we're hiding in caves, when we think we're alone. God meets us not only in our victories, but also in our defeats, not only when we're strong, but also when we're weak and afraid.
And sometimes his most important messages come not in thunder, but in whispers.
Daniel in Babylon. When Jerusalem fell to Babylon, many of the best and brightest of Israel's youth were taken into exile, including a young man named Daniel. He was trained in the language and literature of the Babylonians and brought into the king's service. But Daniel made a decision early on. He would not compromise his faith, even in a foreign land. When offered the royal food and wine, he respectfully asked permission to eat only vegetables and drink only water, staying true to his convictions. God honored this faithfulness, and after 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier than all the other young men. God gave Daniel understanding of visions and dreams, and this gift repeatedly brought him before kings. When King Nebuchadnezzar had a troubling dream that he couldn't remember, he demanded that his wise men tell him both the dream and its interpretation, an impossible task. When they couldn't, he ordered all the wise men, including Daniel, to be executed. But Daniel asked for time and promised to interpret the dream. He and his friends prayed, and that night God revealed the dream to Daniel. Daniel blessed God, saying, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are His. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with Him." Daniel told the king his dream of a great statue made of different materials that was destroyed by a rock cut without human hands. The interpretation revealed the rise and fall of kingdoms, and ultimately God's eternal kingdom that would never be destroyed. Years later, when a new king, Darius, ruled, Daniel served him faithfully. But jealous administrators looked for grounds to accuse Daniel. They could find no corruption or negligence in his administrative work, so they targeted his faith. They convinced King Darius to issue a decree. For 30 days, anyone who prayed to any god or human except the king would be thrown into the lion's den. The king, not realizing the trap, signed the decree. Daniel heard about the decree, but he didn't hide. He went home, opened his windows toward Jerusalem, and prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done. He wasn't being defiant or showy. He was simply remaining faithful to his practice of prayer. The administrators caught him and brought him before the king. Darius was devastated. He had been trapped into condemning the man he trusted and respected most. He tried to find a way to save Daniel, but the law couldn't be changed. As Daniel was brought into the lion's den, the king said to him with hope, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you from the lions." Daniel's voice came back, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed. He had Daniel lifted out of the den, and not a scratch was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Daniel's story shows us that faithfulness in the small things, like daily prayer, prepares us for faithfulness in the big tests. He didn't suddenly become courageous when facing the lion's den. He had been practicing courage every day in his prayer life, in his dietary choices, in his work ethic, in his integrity. And even when our faithfulness leads us into danger, even when we end up in the lion's den, God is able to shut the mouths of the lions. He is with us in the den.